This is Steve.
And this is Sean.
This is Acromedia's High Five.
So, Steve, what are we going to talk about?
We're going to be talking about deployment and continuous integration.
Ooh, big words.
We actually do those things too.
I know, we're not just being like, you should do these. We don't, but you should.
Yes, we do deploy sites.
Yeah.
Why don't you start with just deployment first, because that's kind of the blanket piece, I think, and then we can get a little bit deeper into continuous integration.
Right. Deployment is taking the changes or the new site you've made and putting it onto a live server so people can actually view it. That involves moving files up, maybe moving settings, database up. That involves making sure a domain actually points to where you need it to point so that people can see it.
We were just talking about propagation a little while ago,
Yeah.
so this is top of mind.
Well, there's important little steps where you're like, I put all the code up. It's like, well, I can't see it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's up. And it's like, well, if I can't see it, is it really up?
Yeah. Nope, it ain't.
It's the internet. Everyone should be able to see it. So it's all that stuff to work. It's more than just, ages ago it used to be just like FTP up some files, and it's like, but there's code and there's can be files like images and stuff like that. There can be database, there can be configuration settings, there can be caches that need to be cleared, automatic stuff that needs to be regenerated. There's a lot more that goes on with the deployment.
So before we dive too much into deployment, let's do a little bit of the fact how continuous integration works with deployment. It is a piece of deployment itself.
Yeah, and it's basically the setup of having all those kind of pieces that I talked about all happen sort of every time.
Every single time.
And so what they mean by sort of continuous integration is that basically anytime you commit a change to version control, it runs maybe not a full deployment, but it runs at least some of your steps. Everything but the put it live. Can I generate the files? Did that work? Did the settings merge in correctly? Did all this stuff happen? It runs automated testing. Maybe it checks code standards. It does all those things to say okay, this is deployable, right? At any point, this should, if you need to deploy right now, this should all work. It should be fine. And you do that all the time. So you're not oh, it's super broken right now, but in the future it will work. Probably, maybe, hopefully.
So the history of us, as a company, deploying websites on a regular basis, we didn't always used to do continuous integration.
Yeah. And nor did really anyone. It wasn't, a thing, and it became more and more of a thing. And now it's sort of the de facto way to do things. It's you're antiquated if you don't do it now, whereas it used to be some people did it and some people didn't, and ages ago nobody.
Well, back in my project management days, I'm so used to the testing environment or dev environment, testing environments, getting ready to push them to production environments, and that's if you use continuous integration, we're not really talking about those things really anymore. Obviously, we have dev environments that we're working on. But when we go to push,
and you don't necessarily have those three in that order. Sometimes you can have continuous integration set up so that they will just create a dev environment. So you just push and you give it a tag or something like that, and it's oh, now here's change, March's changes, and they just a server spins up and everything, and you can view them there, and then they can be merged in live. But maybe you don't have a staging; you just have a bunch of devs, and then people review them, and then they get merged in and pushed up, or it might be a thing where it's not a website, it's an app or something that gets built, right? So it doesn't have a live site that it gets pushed to, but it gets built, and compiled into an app, and then it gets released, put up so people can download it or whatever, right? So very similar process, and again, you want that to handle automatically. You don't want to, hey, we're doing the release. Oh, this doesn't actually compile and work together because we never tried that.
So I'm curious to know two things. One thing would be, what is the best practice that we should be using for Drupal commerce websites, specifically for deployment? And the second, a little bit of an addition as to why is that the best practice?
So I'll go over we'll talk pretty much Drupal 8 here.
Okay,
Most
cool.
of this will apply to Drupal 7, although not entirely.
Okay.
But we won't bother going over both of them. There's a couple things. You should run automated tests, which there are a ton. Even if you haven't written any of your own, there are a ton that come with Drupal, and you should at least run some of those, if not all of them. All of them can take a few hours, but before a full live launch, it'd be nice to run those, or at least run sections based on if you work a lot, you're doing some custom commerce theming or something like that, or you're doing some changes related to that. Run all the commerce tests, see that they still work. You should run code standards there through, there's a PHP code standards plugin basically, and there are a set of Drupal code standards.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a specific set of like Drupal follows the following thing. It's very simple, similar to what Symfony uses, but it has a few customizations for Drupal, and those can be all automatically checked for. And so you pass in, it's basically a configuration file that comes with Drupal. You pass it in, you run that, and it says, hey, the following things don't meet. And so you want to fix those, and it keeps your code always being nice and easy to work with. And so anyone who knows Drupal is going to be familiar with your code setup. And there's absolutely no reason to do your own custom code standards, because now you're different than 95% of the code that you're working with. Why?
So that's a good
match with the Drupal
baseline, I
ones.
think. You're kind of doing everything that's the gimme.
Yeah,
Right?
those are the ones that like. There's absolutely no reason, because they take almost no work to do.
And they already exist. You're just simply
You're just
implementing.
running them. That's all you're doing, right? And just making sure you actually follow those, and you're not putting stuff up with 20 broken tests and with shoddily formatted code. And it really takes very little time to, like, if you have some code center stuff that you that fails, half of it can be fixed automatically. And even the stuff that can't, it's usually just like, you didn't actually comment this function, or you didn't, and it's like, well, you should just go do that, and it takes 2 minutes, and then now you have nice code. And so once you get in the habit, that the time is negligible, but you have this consistency of code. Any code that any one of your developers is putting in, any contractors, whoever, meets a certain set of standards.
Fair enough.
So that part's really good. As far as the actual sort of deployment part, everything is Composer based now in Drupal 8. You should definitely do that. So you shouldn't have everything saved to your repository. You should only have the custom stuff saved to your repository. And what you should do during deployment is you should run a Composer install, which is going to grab all that stuff. And then you should also run any of your builds, compile your Sass into CSS, anything like that. You should do that on your build server. And then you should have, then now you have all the files needed to make the site, and you push those up to your live server. So you're doing almost nothing on your live server, except maybe flushing the caches afterwards. But all the build, any of that stuff is happening in your continuous integration environment. And then basically your live server can be dumb, for lack of a sort of better word. It does the minimum it has to do. It doesn't have a bunch of these build tools and stuff like that, because you don't really want to be doing that on a live server. You do that, and then you push it up, and the live server should just actually be serving the files. You don't want the kind of thing where, like, oh, hey, our site's super slow, because we're running a big build right now. And it's like, we'll do the build somewhere else, and then just copy it up, right? That used to not be the case. Lots of people do Composer setups in different ways, and it's like, no, set everything up as absolutely as much as possible as that you can do ahead of time, move it up, and then only do the things you absolutely have to do on live, like flush the caches, because the caches only exist on live. You have to do that, but it should be as minimal as you can go.
Since continuous integration is the thing to do now, it shocks me that some people aren't doing it yet. Why?
I mean, it does take a little bit to get it set up initially and to learn how it works and get the sort of kinks out of it, but a lot of it is just, that seems hard, and so I won't do it. Like we talked about automated testing.
I was going to say
right?
automated
It's the same
testing.
thing.
Like,
It's-
we can't grill that one anymore. We even talked about like flossing your teeth.
Yeah.
Now, do we floss our teeth is a whole other situation, but you should floss your
The
teeth.
thing, at least with continuous integration, is once you set it up once, you will like never not do it.
Yeah.
Because once you use it the first time, you're like, this is so amazing, and you'll get to the point where like for most of our sites, if we want to do a full deployment of a new setup, I take the branch or whatever that I'm working on, and I merge it into master. That is the only step that I do.
'Cause everything else is
Everything
running
else is done automatically. And then I probably look at the site to make sure that it actually worked.
Yeah.
But, you have all of that. Was everything successful? Did
I'm
all
glad
the
you looked at
steps
the
pass?
website to make
Did
sure it worked.
everything-
Don't make that my problem.
Yeah, but there's no other steps. I don't have to. But you don't have any of those problems. You don't have to be like, oh, I forgot to clear the cache. Oh, I didn't put this file up or whatever, because all that stuff happens automatically every single time.
So you're setting up a base, and you're also going to start eliminating human error too, just if you forgot to do maybe a half step or a
Because
quarter step.
if there's 10, 15 steps that have to be done, you just put those in the config file once, and then they get all done every time.
Yeah.
Without fail. And if they do not happen for one reason, they will fail, the deploy will stop, it will email you or whatever and say, hey, the build didn't go up. Here's the error. You can even have it set to, like, if it gets to a certain point and then it fails, it can roll back stuff, If you're like, oh, hey, we got here and then now it's not working, undo that change and put the old stuff back up or whatever. And it makes it so much nicer, especially, I talked about deploying a new build or something like that, but where it's actually the best is you just have to do a very small fix. You just look on and you're like, oh, this is broken. It's like a 2-line fix. It's really easy, but it's really bad. Instead of having to go like, oh, I'll do all these 20 steps again or whatever, and you're in a rush, do that one change, commit it, merge it in,
Yeah.
boom, it all updates. And you might have a thing where, say your live push can be not a simple one. It might just not be push up to one server. It might be like, here's the database server, here's the file server, then we have 4 different web servers that run and a caching server, right? So it's like it's actually got to go up to these 4 different servers and stuff. But you set that up once, your job does it all automatically. And the more complex your site deployment can get really complex, but you only have to figure that out once, and anyone working with the code doesn't have to figure that out, which can also be really great if, say I'm doing after-hours support, or the normal project team is out sick or something like that, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't launch a big, huge set of change, but there's some sort of emergency fix that has to happen. If I have to read through a bunch of instructions and figure out how to deploy this, it's going to take forever. I'm almost certainly going to miss a step.
Sure.
But if I just know everything has auto deployment, so I just commit my change, merge it in, and all the stuff happens the way it should happen, and I just go and view the site the same as normal.
Well, that's pretty important too, because as when you start working with with big sites or with clients that have a lot of value on staying up, it becomes more and more important that you have this type of deployment that is essentially automatic. Because if you don't, then it's like, okay, it's one thing. Okay, I can understand if you have your steps. You launch a site one time, you're not really ever going to touch it again. I can kind of understand that, I suppose. But if you are going to be working on this site again, if you're going to be building more features, maintaining it, or even if the fact that the website does have to stay up, and it's really important that it stays up, which means you are going to tweak it on occasion even. Seems kind of like a no-brainer.
There's also, this depends on how your deployment is, but it can actually be faster and with less downtime, because you might have a thing where hey, in the time between I FTP these files up and then I go in and I flush the cache or whatever, there's a minute or two, and then I forgot to log in and I have to log in or whatever and stuff, and the site's maybe non-functional for that time. If it's done with an automated job, the millisecond that it finishes the upload, boom, it hits the cache clear and it goes, and so your windows of anything being unsynced are as small as they could basically possibly be. And any improvements you can do there, one person does them once, and then they happen consistently every single time. So your deploys can be so much smoother. I can't really overestimate or emphasize how much that is. It's the kind of thing where I said automated testing can seem a little bit like brushing your teeth. Continuous integration isn't like that. It's just a thing where once you do it for the first time, you'll be like, why haven't I done this every single time? And you will be like a complete convert.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Is that your own too long didn't read right there? Is that?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
It's great, and once you do it once, you'll love it.
Awesome.
The little bit to add on is if you work on open source software, most of the continuous integration services that exist offer it for free for open software. Yeah. So if you want to use any of the services like Circle or GitLab CI or Travis CI, they give you free stuff like that even if you just want to test it out or something. So
very cool. I didn't know that either. If you have any questions or comments, in this case specific to what Sean's mostly talked about today, this is mostly you're being a pro. You had a lot of detail.
You're a little rambly.
Yeah. Hey, that's okay. You had a lot of good information. If you have any questions though, put them down below, and looking forward to answer those for you.
Also, you can check out our blog at acromedia.com. You can check us out on Facebook, and you can follow me on Twitter.